Hello, everybody. Oh, there we go, lovely. Hello, everybody. Thank you, obviously, so much for coming to see, first of all, the final session, and also the fact that I have to contend with a storm, which is not the best kind of circumstances, but we are obviously coming towards the end of the conference, so as Sam has said, a few of us might be starting to get a little bit kind of sleepy, but good news. I am what my mum refers to as the noisy one. So a little bit of a warning, I do get quite animated. I actually have a degree in theatre, so I'm actually an actor stroke software engineer. That's a natural combination of things. And here's a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Jim, or James. Pick one, colloquial one, government name, either. A few things about me. You've got, hey! I bet that's a power cut. Is it a power cut? No. Good. And it's back, hooray! Let's hope that doesn't happen again. There's my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn if you want to hit me up, and my obvious graveyard of unfinished projects, as is normal. I'm very active on Twitter, so if you've got any questions about things that you're hearing about today, etc., then hit me up, send me a DM, I'll respond. And I am the PHP developer advocate at Vonage. And if anyone has not heard of Vonage, you may have heard of us as in a previous life as Nexmo. We are a cloud communications platform provider. Got any questions about integrations, Symfony, Laravel, sending SMS, doing automated voice calls, text to voice and stuff like that? Give me a shout. I'll talk about our code base, etc. And that's my day to day. We're also hiring across the board on our team, so there's good. There's all sorts of things like technical writer. We're looking for advocates in Python and Java, etc. Has this happened to anyone else? Oh, good. Oh, right. So I'm not alone. I'm just nervously looking at the. Okay. Right. So. I'm just gonna. Here's a bit of an outline, just to see. So I just sort of let you know what's going to happen. Here's the sort of the TLDR for it, right? Testing. This isn't controversial. Testing external APIs that your software relies on is hard, right? No one disagree with that. I found something in my kind of use case for what I was doing, and it was a library. So I was like, oh, that looks quite cool. And do you know what? It's not even new. It's like, you'd think it'd be like, oh, it's something shiny. But it's not. It's like, this thing's been around for years. So I was like, yeah, okay. I'll check it out, see what's going on. Yeah, all right, give it a go. And the conclusion is, oh my gosh, what is going on? Why does nobody know about this more? What's wrong with us? We're always wrong as developers. People should be doing more of this. Anyway, so the quick outline bit is, look, I'm going to talk about how these problems come about, what the library is that I found, and what it does, when to use it, how to use it, and should you use it, because the answer to everything is, it depends. So here we go. Who knows what this is? One hand, and that's, two hands, three, everyone was just being shy. This is a Betamax tape from Sony, and this was a technologically superior home recording system invented by Sony in, I think, about 1980 or something. No, it wasn't, it was a bit before then. And it contended with another product, and the other product was this. Hands up if you know what this is. Yeah, there you go, you see, there's the conclusion. There was a battle, and we all know who won, because I've seen the hands, right? This is VHS, and this was not as technologically superior as Betamax. It was created by JVC, and it was adopted as an open standard, as opposed to Sony's closed proprietary system. And therefore, it was adopted by Hitachi and Mitsubishi and others, and this thing was cheaper to produce, and it won the home videotaping wars. Now, I know what you're thinking, apart from getting very, very bored. You're thinking, come on, Jim. What is this? Is this relevant? And the answer is, why do you think they accepted me to come and speak on PHP UK, like on the main stage just before the closing keynote? Of course, yes, of course. I mean, you know, well, sort of. Okay, I'll be honest. Look, it's tenuous, but you know, I've got to get your attention somehow, right? Come on, give me some slack here. Give me some slack. What I'm trying to say when it comes to this thing about VHS versus Betamax is, in software development, we come across this. Sometimes the most practical solution is the best one. That's not a particularly sort of controversial thing, but it leads me on to things that I'm going to do two bugbears, right, of when it comes to the most practical solution of why it's the better one. The first one is this. Yes, sometimes the most practical solution is the best one, and sometimes we repeat things like the right solution, which leads to things like this. Don't mock what you don't own. And every time I see don't mock what you don't own while I'm there banging away going like, but the thing is not working, the thing is not working, Jim, why is it not working? I don't know. And I'm just like, it makes me think of a film from 1998, and it is a quote, a specific quote, which is, wrong, you're not wrong, Walter, you're just an asshole. Because it's true, isn't it? It's don't mock what you don't own is right. It is right. You shouldn't be doing that. That's not your responsibility. That's somebody else's responsibility. But we have to face problems in software development. And when we face these problems, sometimes something a bit more practical is like, oh, do I want to break the rules? I'm thinking things like it's currently happening with Laravel at the moment, where people have suddenly started debating whether to access private properties by using reflection and things like that, right? Sometimes these are, yes, you shouldn't do that. But you're also like, yeah, but my use case is different. So here's sort of examples of the things that we have to deal with. For my first full stack role, I got made to read a book. It was a very good book, and it's called Build APIs That You Won't Hate by Phil Sturgeon. And Phil said, this thing will happen. And I was like, okay, I've got the theory of that, but it's not going to happen. And then I sat down, and then I was like, this is an external API that I have to code for. And it goes, okay, here's a reply. And I'm like, really? Oh, it's real. It exists. It exists. People do this. Thanks. Thanks. I hate it. Thanks. But it's true, isn't it? Sometimes we do have to deal with stuff like this. And what I'm trying to say here is, like, we have to tiptoe around external dependencies, as it is with software development anyway. And this is why we need to consider our tooling, and we need tooling for these kind of things. And so what this leads to is my second quote that is an absolute nightmare, and I can't stand it, and it leads to quotes like this. I don't have time to think about this extra tooling that I need, so therefore we don't have time for testing. Nobody says this. Do not say this, except when I say nobody says this, I've worked at many companies that say this. And when a company says, look, we ship code, it relies on external stuff, we don't have time for testing, I think, because, you know, really, it's a joke, isn't it? No one should be doing that, really. It's not very practical, though. It's not very practical to just laugh at people that say that, you know, that say we don't have time for testing. What is practical is to find out why people say these things. So here is a real-world example of why people say, don't do TDD because we don't have time for it. Here's a real-world example. So we're building something, and it extends off something. So in this case, we'll say Shopify. So how do you extend off the Shopify API? Well, you do same as anything else that's got a pass or a SAS. Is okay. I've got a Symfony framework that extends off it, and it communicates with Shopify somehow. How does it do that? Yeah, REST API. Okay. So given that, that's how do you test this? Because that's obviously it's a problem, right? So this is the common kind of approach that people tend to kind of take is, okay, well, if we were going to do testing, we've got to chop off that, and then we've just got access to, we've got to mock the API somehow, and mock an API we don't own. Right, well, what am I using? I'm using PHP unit, and I'm using like PHP spec for using the prophesize library to try and to put in mocks and stubs, right? So in that case, how do I, this bit here, how do I link up that? And the answer across the board for loads and loads of code bases that I've seen seems to be create some fixtures in JSON, and they will be exactly the same. They will be exactly the same as production. But you know what's coming though, don't you? Real world examples, it's a problem. Yay! API change that was undocumented, no one's told you about it, and then, okay, and so this is different. I didn't expect this. What's happening there? Well, okay, well, if that's broken, then this. Like, oh no, your tests don't work, and then suddenly you're like, oh no, and then and it all goes wrong, and then there's a yacht with us on fire, and then there's bananas, and then there's blow up donkeys and whatever, and then suddenly Clippy appears. There we go, there's Clippy. Got too eager and got too excited about the fact that Clippy was going to appear. And then basically, what I have explained is, I have explained with this thing here, why that happens, right? That's a real world example of like, we're not going to do testing when we rely on something else, because you can't do it. Because every time you do it, you create fixtures. What happens if people are just changing their API every like 2 weeks, or even worse, they're shipping something that's undocumented. So that was a scenario where it was a real world scenario, but I couldn't do anything about it. But in my job at Vonage at the moment, I have this same problem because I maintain the PHP SDK library. And how do you think it communicates with Vonage, considering that it's an SDK for Vonage, right? Well, it's exactly the same. There's Vonage, same thing, REST API. So therefore, rather than the mess that you saw before, I thought, okay, I need to address this problem, but I need a better solution on how to do it. And the solution ended up looking a bit like this. I work on a multi-language team, and it's really, really cool to have code review and to learn from people that are doing Ruby and Python, et cetera, et cetera. So I speak to Carl. Carl's our Ruby developer, and I'm like, Carl, I've done this thing, and I can't do this thing, and blah, 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 blah. Where's my Ruby? There it is. I've got this thing, and I have an external API, and he's like, oh, yeah, just use VCR, and then that'll sort it out. And I'm like, yeah, no, I think I've sort of thought of that. Wait, sorry, hold on. What? Go back one. Use what? Use VCR. What's that? Oh, it's a thing where you just record, like, external APIs, and then you play them back. There's probably a PHP one. I was like, no, it's not going to be a PHP one. Of course it's not going to be, otherwise I would have heard of it, right? So he's like, hold on. No. There you go. What? What's this? Why are we not talking about this? So what does it do, right? Here we go. Let's dive into it a little bit. So you get your VCR, and there it is, your beautiful NICAM digital stereo, presumably with a automatic recording program setup thing that you set and then never works. Mystery. Did they ever work? No. You want to record your API, so you set it to record, and you insert a tape that you're going to record it on. So in this case, your limited edition copy from 1993 your copy of the Vonage API, and then you put it in, hit record. Once it's recorded, in it goes into your library of other successful API recordings, such as Dumb and Dumber and the Terminator, et cetera, et cetera. And then when it comes to it, you run your unit tests, plays them back. Can it really be that simple? Could it really be that simple? Okay, well, let's dive into a bit more, and I'm going to show you, tell you a bit more about how it works. So, how does it do that? Here's how it does it. Anything that comes over the wire that uses the curl extension, or the SOAP client, if you're a masochist, or stream wrapper, so anything that's got fgets, fopen, et cetera, it will intercept those, and that's when it hits the stream and records what's coming over the wire. But I know what you're really thinking, which is, that's sort of, okay, that's the beginning, but come on, Jim. How does it do that? And I'll be honest with you, the answer to that question looks a bit like this. Please don't ask me how the authors got around Ruby's monkey patching to do this, because it's probably voodoo tea leaves and chicken bones. So that's the answer. I mean, basically, don't question it. Magic sauce. It's lovely. How does it look? So I've been sort of doing a lot of rabbiting and showing you very relevant things like Jurassic Park tapes. How does this look, right? So I'm going to show you how it looks in code, how it's practically usable. Things that we need. We have a base singleton client that it comes with. Sorry, in my slides I didn't actually put that you install it via Composer, but I'm kind of hoping that's sort of the standard now. But so you Composer get, if you look at the VCR, it'll basically give you the command to just install it, right? In your base singleton client, then you need to give the configuration object that it comes with that you can get back. I'll show you in code how you do that. Give it a storage path where it saves your cassette. You give it a format. I'll get onto that in a minute when I show you the code. You give it a mode, so you're either recording or you're playing back, and then there's another mode which allows you to actually run it once, and then it automatically switches back into playback, which is quite nice. And then you've got an on, an off, and eject for when you've done a recording and you want to eject something out and save it. So in code, this looks like this. You have a VCR class, which is in the VCR namespace. Storage path, the first bit here, VCR configure, that returns a VCR configure object, and then you've got quite a nice fluid API that makes kind of sense. So set cassette path, and I've used base path. It's a core thing of Laravel and Symfony, and then the base path, and then tests cassette. Set that, and then it will save them there. You've got 3 options for your storage. So you've got JSON. It's YAML default out of the box. If you want to, you can change it to JSON. And again, like the SOAP client, if you're a masochist, you can choose XML. This is how the mode works. So this is the really important bit of the functionality of it. So you've got new episodes. The top one is instructing you to record everything that happens over the wire. So whatever is going on with whatever client that is you want to use, let's take the most common use example will be Guzzle. Anything that Guzzle is consuming and any requests that it's reading and writing. So new episodes will record it every time. Then when you want to actually do playback, you don't change anything else. You just set the mode to none, and then that's playback. And then you've got, every time you need to interact with VCR, you've got turn on, turn off, eject. Pretty straightforward language, I'd like to think. So given all of these, given that this is how sort of roughly it looks in code, I decided to play around with it, and I got a sort of a use case for some code that that I'm responsible for now in my repository. And I use the PEST testing framework. Does anybody use PEST? Nobody, not a single person uses PEST. Great, I'm on my own. It is so without that sort of assumed knowledge thing, because I don't know whether anyone would use it or not, it's based on Jest from JavaScript, so it's got that Mocha style kind of API as opposed to the sort of traditional PHP unit, which is why you've got that keyword there of it. So it will send an SMS to the live server. So this test here, this is a live test. It's an integration test. Therefore, that's the classic, well, actually, we need VCR for this, right? Because what you're doing here is, this is arbitrary stuff to do with Vonage code, but it's like, we want to create an SMS, then I'm going to send it via the client, and then I'm going to do a check here with the assertion of expect the count to be 1, and then when I get the status, I want the status to be 0. The 0 is the carrier has delivered it to the mobile phone, right? So how does this look with throwing in some VCR code? The way that I kind of implemented this is very, very a handy thing of PEST that I really, really like. And you have this uses keyword up here, and uses was designed for things like quite common use cases in frameworks for testing when you want to refresh your database. So there is actually in Laravel, for instance, there's a refresh database class, and what it does is, for every single unit test, wipe the database clean. Once the database is clean, then run your fixtures, populate your database, and then do the thing. In this case, you can add VCR trait. So VCR trait is something I created. It's a trait that then gives you, I basically wrapped all of VCR around it, and then you've got access to it within your testing framework at runtime, which is quite neat. With that in mind, these are some example methods. So before I run this test, switch the VCR to true, which then calls the underlying VCR switch on, or turn on. Set the VCR to new episode, so I'm going to record them. Run the test, as if it was just running the test. Eject the VCR, switch off the VCR, because I might be doing some other tests and I might not want the overhead of memory, right? And what it will spit out when you eject it looks like this. This is the YAML copy of it. And to be honest, it doesn't really look that alien. I mean, when I saw it, I was like, well, okay, it looks like when you sort of export a Postman collection, right? When you've got like XHR request, and you've just got like a sort of a JSON payload, and it looks a bit like that. There's nothing kind of mysterious about this. There's no sort of secret saucy stuff in there. And then when you want to run your test suite, we just switch up some stuff. So turn on the VCR. Now you load in a cassette, and that cassette is the one that was ejected, and you save it. Set the VCR mode to none. Run your tests. Switch off the VCR. When I coded this, I was like, there is no way that this is going to work. And guess what? It did. Okay, why is no one doing this more? That's madness. So that's a sort of a practical example of seeing it in action. Now I'm going to go into your pros and your cons, because yes, okay, the thing is magic sauce, but I have to be fair. There are good things about it, and there are things that there are problems of, like, well, you know, it depends. Here's reasons for using it. The library. Now, this might be a little bit sort of controversial, but I might get some nodding heads for this. API changes versus documentation. In the real world, in the real practical world, yes, everybody writes documentation, or if you listened to Alexandra White's talk yesterday, no, people are bad at writing documentation. Everyone should be doing it, and it should be up to date. Da, 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 da. Come on, real world. Are they doing it or not? It's not your product. Someone else's. What happens if the product is something? You might have something really amazing like Stripe or something, where their documentation team are absolutely fantastic. Or you might have something cobbled together in 2007 and there is no other equivalent to it, and the docs are out of date. So you've got big kind of I'll get onto it in a minute. I call it sort of chicken name, but documentation needs to be up to date. And of course, it's always up to date, but no, it isn't. Let's be honest. Sometimes it's not. And you've got this chicken and egg thing with, okay, you know, when we release stuff at Vonage, it's like, you know, we coordinate API changes so that the open API spec is updated, and then the documentation is updated, the code snippets are done, and then the API is actually released. But not everyone does that. Sometimes you've got like a accidental shipping and things like this, and when I say that, I mean that leads to the next thing. With this, you've got a single, rather than relying on someone else's documentation that might be right, might not be right, who knows? This is a single source of truth, this cassette. The cassette does not lie. The code does not lie. Sometimes the code lies. And what if I've dealt with this a lot. In some ecosystems, people accidentally either ship stuff or the behavior is not as documented. What happens if they externally ship something, you don't know about it? And what if it's something even worse, where it's something that changes state and you don't know about it for like 6 months, and then someone goes, okay, this is wrong, and then you go back and you think, okay, there's now millions of records that are corrupted and need to be fixed. What if something accidentally ships? You've got no control over that. Semver, yes, again, exactly the same thing as documentation. In a la-di-da world, we're always good with it, and we know exactly how Semver works. If it's a minor release, if it's a major release, etc., if it's a hot fix or a patch. But what happens if, like, you don't have control over their docs? You don't have control over their versioning either. So, well, I don't know. So, what if they break Semver? This isn't a backward compatible thing. That's for them to get right. But what if they're not right? Not always right. The cassette libraries, this is probably my biggest kind of take. If there's anything that you take away from this, the cassette libraries recording with this library move dependencies from them to you. And that makes everybody happy, right? Other good things. Bug turnaround and visibility of the code. It's so awesome working with this. I was like, really? This is amazing. Let's take, like, example. GitHub issue pops up, and you've got something like Zapier that hooks up, you know, GitHub comes in, and it, I don't know, pings to Slack or whatever, and you go, okay, API, right, fine. Okay, external API is broken. People are complaining that your software doesn't work, it's consuming an accident. So, okay, how do I approach this? Well, if I've gone down the VCR route, then record a new cassette, pest, run, bingo! Because the tests have failed because of an external API in the new cassette, you know where it's failed, and you know what they've changed. That's pretty awesome. Another big one. Speed! NYPD, there's a bomb on your bus. Sorry, sorry, Keanu. Lovely bloke. Acting's marginally better than mine. But remember how I said we don't have time for testing? I said that, didn't I? But why am I showing this? Why am I saying speed? Thank you for asking, Jim. I shall answer that. Example. Build me the thing. I don't know what the thing is. Build me the thing, Jim. Okay, there you go. I'm going to pick your weapon of choice. I chose Symfony. And the reason I'm choosing Symfony is not just because Symfony are here and I want to keep them happy. It relies on an external vendor API. Rather than just naming one, I just thought, okay, let's say it's just some big thing and they've got like an open API spec, right? And for it is open API and not Swagger. Do not go down that route, otherwise Lorna Mitchell will tell you off. Set up a vendor account with the external API. Pop in the cassette. Write the tests that will communicate over the wire. TTD. You're writing the tests first before you're writing the business rules and the functionality. Yes, that's quite nice. Commit it. We'll come up with downsides to the software, but either commit it into the source code, but obviously there's implications of that, or I don't know, if you want to do an integration, push it to an S3 bucket, something like that. And then, hey, bingo, ship it. I mean, when I say speed, that's speed, but also external API, TDD, that's TDD. You're writing the tests and recording them. How awesome is that? Stonks. How awesome is that? Why isn't everyone doing this? That's an example of speed, and it's just mind-blowing. Like, you can do that. This is like a bit of I've put old man yells at cloud. Whoa, get off my lawn. I'm a bit old school. I'm getting on a bit. So hence, I've got the Amiga on there. I like the fact that it is practically, it's true that practically it means that you've got offline development if you've got recordings. So traveling, etc., but also if the wire goes down, if, say, something really, really, really irritating like a massive storm happens, then, yay, offline development can still develop. Cool, okay, yeah, you can't push all the changes that you're doing to GitHub, but, that just popped into my mind just now. Let's ignore that. Go away thoughts, go away thoughts. And to be fair, in a la BBC style, some other kind of opinions are available. So why should I not use it? There are reasons to not use it. External vendors. You've got to set them up. When you set them up, is it going to be easy? Is when you sign up, you're going to have you signing up as is it a production thing and it's going to be production? Is it going to cost money? Is it going to cost money over the wire per transaction, etc.? And from that, if you're going to write TDD and then you're going to put tests out and then try and record them over the wire, what happens if what you need to do is a staging environment? I gave an example of Shopify before, which you probably can do something like that, but not always. And it's your problem because they're not considering this, are they? So they're like, no, you don't get a staging environment. You just sign up to our SaaS. Meh. Big one, and this really is just a follow-on to the slide before when it comes to staging environments and things like that. Secrets, you've got API credentials and things, and you've got environment variables, right? Okay, yeah, but you've got to consider the data that's being returned because, okay, nobody is going to care about a GUID, or maybe they are going to care about a GUID. Maybe there's a security implication, but you don't know because it's an external API, and you're like, that might be sensitive. That might be a vulnerability in their server. If they have this information, it might not be. Who knows? If you anonymize it and you come up with a fancy thing of well, actually, I'm going to anonymize this so that there's no PII, you're like, well, then, is it a true test? Getting into gray areas. again, so I mentioned the staging environment. Maybe you can't set up something like that. Maybe you just have a production thing. So if a client has said, build me the thing, Jim, and they're like, and they've got, also, there is a live thing here. And you're like, great. Yeah, no, it's a live server. Oh, and it's full of like actual data. Okay, what happens there? And it means that you've just got more overhead and more strategy and more things to think about to do this successfully. And coding errors, if you do ship something that's got a coding error or something's wrong with the code, like you're not hitting the right endpoint and you're not testing the right thing, then, you know, might cost you depending on the pricing structure, especially if it's like a very, very busy API that does like millions of calls, etc. What happens if something goes wrong and you quickly got to stop it? Things like that. You know, these are things that you need to consider. And I've said how amazing is the cassette library, the fact you've just got to a library of APIs, but this also brings its own problems to the front of everyone's mind. So you've got like, you know, you've got to organize it. So how do you name the cassettes? Do you name it after their API versioning? Is their API versioning like good, or is it chicken bones? Who knows? Do you come up with a system of incrementing it? Do you just use dates? So you've got like, so you call it API version 2.3, but also I call it 2020 final one. So naming, you've got to come up with a strategy for doing it, and that is a bit annoying. And maybe, you know, your CI pipelines for your software that you've got, maybe they've already got, you know, a tagging system for releases, and then you're like, okay, well, how does that, do I add a different subset of tagging? Because at the moment, like what I deal with, when I put a tag on Packagist, it automatically picks it up, and that's how I deploy, right? But your system could be anything, so you've got to come up with how you do the naming of that thing. More reasons not to use it. Harking back to the keynote. It's open source. Look, hold on. Hold it. What I'm trying to say is, you know what I mean? But I'm getting there in the kind of, you know, Jim redemption arc here. I'm saying you are possibly kind of exposing yourself and vulnerabilities in this kind of capacity, but also, oh no, it's open source, but oh yes, it's open source, great. Problem with it? Fix it. What I'm trying to say here is exactly what Lorna was saying, which is support your ecosystem. You need to support people. It's good. It's a good thing to do, and also it makes business sense. So, the author of this library, here he is Jean-Philippe. I cannot find any more information about him, but if anyone does know him or how I can contact him, please let me know, because he's not that active. I mean, he's got an active GitHub account, but it's like, yeah, Twitter and stuff like that, not too much. But there's his GitHub account, and there's another link to the library if you want to take a photo of that so you know where to go. But when looking at the library, what I was surprised about is the amount of pull requests that are open. There's about 40 odd pull requests open, and there's quite a lot of issues. Now, normally, I would go, uh-oh, that's a big no-no. But in this case, nobody else has built something that solves this as quickly and as well as he has done. And therefore, we should be good open source citizens. It's too good to die, because I want to use it, and I'll get to that in my conclusion now. Conclusions on this. Make sure it fits your use case, because I'm not on stage saying, PHP VCR, use it, because you might not need to use it at all. Make sure it fits your use case, because you might not have the overhead to deal with things like naming strategies or PII data, etc., etc. And in order to illustrate this point, I have chosen something that's come about from a blog post in 2012, which was incredibly bad and annoying. But yes, you know, respect the double claw. It fits my use case for the thing that I am doing. So my use case might not be the same as your use case. But it fits my use case for what I do at work. So, bing, 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 yay! I love that emoji. That emoji is so happy. And more has come about as a result of this. So I'm not just going to refactor my code base to use it, which I will do, but there's more to it than that. I thought, hang on a minute, what about integrations? Because this is just a pure PHP library. So, good news. I thought, I'm using Pest for this. If anyone wants to know a bit more about Pest or something, come and see afterwards. Because I'm not saying Pest is Pest. Because you could almost do a talk exactly like this, which is it's not for everyone, but it's kind of cool. But I'm going to write an integration for Laravel and for Pest so that you have that integration out of the box, where you can fire up a Laravel code base and just start going, okay, I'm going to give it some, I've already got my methods out, like vanilla out of the box. Here we go, and you can switch it on. And maybe I'll come up with some sort of API for the naming strategy of the cassette library. No promises, but I might. And I don't know. If it gets traction and people really like it, I could do a Symfony one, or I could do like a Cake one, or something like that. I don't know. So there you go. That's my journey down the PHP VCR route. If you've never heard of it, now you have. Thank you for coming to watch me talk on it. Thank you for listening, everybody. And any questions? Thanks. Really should have had some water on the go, shouldn't I?
Hello.
Hiya.
One question. What is your strategy to expire a cassette? That I'm not completely clear. Is, for example, you record one cassette per test execution or per test method? And how do you expire them?
Well, okay, it's quite a good question, that, because the example I gave, that was turns on the VCR and records it, but that was for one test. The best use case, I would say, for PHP VCR is for integration tests, because you're hitting a live production. Like, you're hitting a server that's a live server or near live if it's a staging server. So therefore, what I would encourage you to do is, if you want to try it out, treat it as an integration test, so therefore run the entire test suite that you've got and record it once, and then you're saving that. There's probably use case if you want to actually run it per test. I imagine there probably is. But that's how I would do it. I do like what so really I'd probably use something like Symfony's the file system components, then get the most recent. But then obviously that creates difficulties of like, but what if I don't run the most recent? But then something like the wrapper that I'm looking at, I'd probably want to create a wrapper that says run it, but then insert this cassette during it, so that you have like locally, if you want to try and go back in time, you can like pick what it is that's gone wrong. That's kind of how I do it overall. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, more or less. The approach that I imagined was to expire every day or something like that, or maybe every time that you run Composer update, you expire the cassettes to make sure that you ask the information again from the server. Yeah,
maybe. I mean, something like something in sort of like in Laravel land where you've got scheduled jobs. You'd have to write your own like domain logics and business logic that then almost polls the cassette library, and so you can look at the created date, and if you wanted that in your release cycle, and you want to expire something, maybe then change the name. So you've got like in your naming convention, then you've got like expired, or I was going to say delete it, maybe archive it. So you'd have like two folders. You've got like live. You've got like use the file system to your advantage, and that applies whether you do it locally or whether you do it like in a bucket in S3, that kind of thing.
So you kind of have like a sort of repository of the previous results that you got, so you can test against maybe an older cassette and know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of an extra layer of complexity you could do, which is if you do like a sort of if you come up with sort of some DevOps magic, you could actually check out Git tag versions if you version your software with Git tags versus specifying the version of the cassette that you want. So you could do that. Sounds fairly logical, but probably quite painful in practice to actually do. I have written systems similar to that in the past, to be honest. It was a pain.
One last quick question. Do you upload the cassettes to the GitHub repositories or your repositories?
For the integration for the software that I'm responsible for, I basically haven't decided what I'm going to do with that yet. I think we have GitHub Actions for our pipelines, right? It's because it's a contained library. It's not like a sort of a large piece of enterprisey software, and it's like one big monolith that does this. So we don't have things like sort of Circle CI or Travis or things like that. So maybe in GitHub Actions, I might put in some sort of some magic of how you run the tapes, but at the moment when starting to investigate it, I'm doing it all locally, but it needs to be stored somewhere. I don't think it's the source, but it depends on what you're testing in. If you've got anonymized data, maybe source is okay, because really, if there's nothing sensitive in there, then it is part of the source code because it is your library of testing. So, I think for this one, I'm going to do it. I'm going to say it. It depends, but use the method that feels right for you, because I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer of how to store it.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone? Oh, yes. I was about to say, everyone's just like, please, Jim, I'm so tired, and I have a storm to brace.
Sorry. First, thank you very much. I am definitely in the category of people that wish I had that in the past. I will admit, just the other day I had a bit of code and it hits an external API, and I ended up, it was just taking too long to make all the calls, and I ended up dumping it to a JSON file and then reading it and just faking it that way. And
this is the classic use case for it.
Yeah. So yeah, first, thanks. That's brilliant. And also, I'm not on Pest yet, but I would definitely be interested in collaborating on a Laravel plugin if you're interested.
Cool. Yeah.
My actual question is: do you know whether there's any kind of way of tying in the different cassettes with, for example, PHP units data providers to be able to say, like, run these on version 2 of Vonage's API and then run them on version 1 sort of thing? Yeah,
the honest answer is I don't, it's not something I've tried, and I don't know, but at the same time, I would say that it would be probably not too tricky to do, and it would look a bit like in GitHub Actions, for instance, in the way we run a test suite is that we use the matrix feature. Not that matrix. We use the matrix feature in an array, so it says PHP 7.4 and then 8 and then 8.1, and then it runs the entire suite. So it would be something like that, and I think that that's entirely feasible to do. And I didn't actually consider doing it, well, it's because I was in Pest, so I wouldn't have thought about it, but the way that PHP units data providers would probably be a really good sort of perfect use case for that. But that's also made me think of something with the way how the cassette libraries work is that I possibly would actually store the state of the cassettes where you store the path to the cassette, but also then any kind of additional meta information on there. So that's how I would tie it up with a git tag of saying you run this versus this, etc.
Cool, thanks.
I probably should have added that it's possible that the core Pest team, I have been speaking to Luke Downing, that he might add sort of extra command runners, or we might actually have some kind of custom arguments via extending off Pest, which will have probably come about because of this example of me going through it and going, wouldn't it be great if you could do Pest and then have like custom stuff that you give it in the command line runner? And he's like, yeah. That might be quite cool. So I hope that I can work with him a bit on that. That'd be a nice kind of feature because it gives you really good control over the library. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. Good talk. Thank you. I was just wondering, do you know, with working with your colleagues, if the Ruby VCR and the PHP one would record in the same format so you can share cassettes, or? are they different?
I don't know the answer to that, but what I can do, I definitely don't know the definitive answer, but if you go on the Vonage blog, the aforementioned Carl, who is our Ruby developer, has actually written a whole blog post on Ruby's VCR, which is incidentally how this came about. So if you go onto it, I can, if you come and hit me afterwards, I'll get my laptop and just see if it's got how the storage format works on it.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Cool. Then I shall let you go free and have some coffee before the closing keynote. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to speak. Can you tell that I'm tired? Thank you for coming to watch me speak, and enjoy the closing keynote.
Thank you very much, James.